Paper Vows, Episode 4, The Crack in the Ice, written by Mia. By the time Saturday came, Adrian had prepared for the arrival of a grieving 7-year-old the way he would have prepared for a hostile acquisition. I found him at 8 in the morning standing in the doorway of the room he'd had made for her, and the room stopped me where I stood because it was perfect, and perfect was exactly wrong. Everything matched. A designer had clearly been paid a great deal to produce Child's bedroom the way you'd produce a hotel suite. A flawless bed, shelves of pristine, unread books arranged by color, a wall of new toys still wearing their tags, a rug that had cost more than my van. It was beautiful, and it was terrified, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen because it was a man who didn't know how to love a child out loud doing the only thing he knew, which was buy the very best of everything and arrange it where she could see it. "It's wrong, isn't it?" he said, not turning around. He'd heard me. He always heard me. "I can see it's wrong. I just don't know what's wrong about it." Nothing a Saturday can't fix. I came and stood beside him. "It's not wrong, Adrian. It's a room for a child you've already met. She hasn't met it back yet. Right now it says here, is everything correct? And what a frightened kid needs the first night is somewhere that says you're allowed to make a mess." I nudged him. "Take the tags off the toys. Pull one book off the color line and leave it on the bed like someone got halfway through it. And for God's sake, hide most of this. Too much choice is its own kind of scary when your whole world just got taken away. Leave her room to add herself." He looked at the room and then at me, and there was something close to wonder in it and something closer to panic underneath. What if she hates it here? What if she hates me? Esme, I'm not a warm man. You've read the contract, you've seen. Children know. They can tell. "She's not going to need you to be warm today," I said gently. "She's going to need you to be there, and to not flinch when she's awful, because she's going to be awful. Grief makes kids awful. It's how they check whether you'll leave too. You don't have to be warm. You just have to not leave." I took his cold hand. "And you won't. That's the one thing I already know about you, Adrian Vale. Whatever else you are, you don't leave." She arrived at noon, and she was so small. That was the thing that undid me before she'd said a word. How small she was, in a coat that was a little too big, holding a one-eared felt rabbit by its remaining ear, standing in the vast glass hall looking up and up at the ceiling of her new life with a face that had stopped expecting anything. 14 months of being passed between relatives and apologies had taught Pip Vale not to land anywhere. You could see it. She held herself the way I'd held myself my whole childhood, small, ready, taking up the least possible room, so that when the leaving came it would have less of her to take. Adrian crouched down. To his credit, he crouched immediately so he wasn't looming, and I saw what it cost his careful body to do it. "Hello, Pip," he said, and his voice came out wrong. Too formal. A man addressing a board, and I watched him hear it and not know how to fix it. You remember me. Uncle Adrian. This is your home now. There's a room upstairs that's yours, and..." Pip looked at him with her dead-flat, watchful eyes and said nothing at all, and the silence stretched, and I watched the most competent man I'd ever met drown in 3 feet of water in front of a child the size of a coat. So I sat down, on the floor in my good jeans, in the middle of the enormous hall, which put me below both of them, and I didn't look at Pip, I looked at the rabbit. "That's a very fine rabbit," I said, to the rabbit, not to her. "He looks like he's been a lot of places. I bet he's tired." I left it there, in the air, no question in it, nothing she had to answer. I know the trick of the not question. My mother used it on every frightened stranger, whoever wandered into the gallery. You don't ask a scared thing to perform. You just put something warm down where it can reach it, and you wait. A very long pause. Then, in a small rusty voice that hadn't been used much lately, "His name's Mr. Pomfrey. He lost his ear at the old house." A beat. "Not this old house. My real one. Mr. Pomfrey," I said, with enormous respect. "Then he's been very brave, and so have you, and I think the two of you have had quite enough of being brave for one day." I finally looked up at her, and I smiled, the way Mum smiled. The smile that says you are the most interesting person in the world, and I have nowhere else to be.
"I'm Esme."
I'm not very good at being a grown-up either, honestly. I sit on floors. Do you want to come and tell me which room is yours, and we'll decide together whether it's any good? You're allowed to say it's rubbish. Some of it's a bit rubbish. Pip looked at me for a long moment with those flat, careful eyes. And then she walked over, small, careful steps across the vast, cold floor, and she sat down next to me, close but not touching, and put Mr. Pomfrey in her lap and said, "The man bought too many toys." He really did, I agreed. It's a problem. We'll have to help him. And behind us, still crouched, forgotten, Adrian Vale watched his fake wife sit on the floor and crack open his niece in 90 seconds flat, and when I glanced back at him, his face had done the thing I'd never seen on it, the thing from the dinner party, but worse, wide open now, undefended, the look of a man watching something he wanted so badly he'd never let himself name it. It went wrong at bedtime, the way I'd promised him it would. The day had been a fragile good, too much, too new, but holding. We'd peeled the tags off the toys together and hidden most of them in a cupboard, and Pip had chosen, out of all of it, to play with a wooden spoon and a colander from the kitchen, which Adrian watched with the baffled expression of a man who had spent £4,000 on educational toys and been comprehensively defeated by cookware. She ate exactly the beige foods. She inspected every room with Mr. Pomfrey held out in front of her like a tiny, suspicious surveyor. And once, in the studio, she stood a long time in front of the half-cleaned painting on my easel and asked why half of it was dirty, and I told her it wasn't dirty, it was old, and I was helping it remember what it used to look like. And she thought about that with tremendous seriousness and said, "Can you do that to people?" And I had to turn away and pretend to hunt for a brush. And then night came, the way it does, and a 7-year-old who has lost her mother does not want a perfect bed in a glass tower. She wants the impossible, and at 8:30, Pip stood in the doorway of her beautiful room and would not go in, and when Adrian gently said it was time, the dam broke. Not loudly. That was the worst of it. She didn't scream. She just started to cry, silently, devastatingly, the tears running down her small-set face while she stood rigid clutching Mr. Pomfrey, and she said, in that rusty voice, the thing none of us could fix, "I want my mum. I want my real mum. I don't want a new one." And she looked, when she said it, not at Adrian, at me, with a kind of furious, betrayed grief, because I'd been kind, and kindness from a stranger is unbearable when it isn't the kindness you've lost. You're not her. You're just pretend. And there it was, out of the mouth of a child, the exact truth of the whole house. You're just pretend. I didn't flinch. I'd promised him I wouldn't, and I didn't, though it went into me like a splinter. "You're completely right," I said softly, crouching to her level. "I'm not your mom. Nobody's ever going to be your mom, Pip. She was the only one, and she's gone, and that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and it's not fair, and I'm so sorry. I didn't reach for her. I'm not here to be a new mom." I'm just here to be one more person who doesn't leave. That's all.
You don't have to like me.
You just have to let me be one more. She cried harder, and I let her, and Adrian stood frozen and helpless in the hall, and I thought, now, this is the moment. Do the thing. And I looked at him over Pip's small shaking head, and I mouthed one word.
Play.
And Adrian Vale, who didn't play, who was learning badly with 2 fingers, went to the piano in the next room, and he sat down, and he played her the little phrase. Small and true and a little bit wrong. The wrong notes exactly where I told him to leave them. Halting.
Human.
A grown man's clumsy fingers saying the only thing he had no words for. I am trying. I will keep trying. I made this for you before you came. Pip went still. The crying caught and hitched, and she lifted her wet face and listened to the imperfect little tune drifting in from the dark next room, and something moved across her grief. Not gone. Grief doesn't go, but joined. That's not a real song, she whispered. No, I said. He made it.
For you.
He's rubbish at piano. He's been practicing for weeks, so it'd be a bit less rubbish for tonight. I held out my hand, not pulling, just offering. Do you want to go and tell him how rubbish it is? He needs to hear it from an expert. And Pip, exhausted, emptied, 7 years old and so brave, put her small hot hand in mine and let me walk her into the dark room where her terrified uncle was playing her a broken little song, and she stood by the piano and listened to the whole thing, and at the end she said, with the devastating honesty of the young, "You played it wrong 4 times. I know, said Adrian, not stopping. Play it again. I'll tell you when. And he did, and she told him when. And I sat on the floor by the piano leg with Mr. Pomfrey, who had had a very long day, and I watched a cold man and a broken child build a fragile bridge out of wrong notes in a dark room, and I understood, with a quiet that was almost grief itself, that I was in very serious trouble. She fell asleep on the rug by the piano, eventually mid-instruction, the way children do, all at once, like a dropped puppet. Adrian carried her up. He did it carefully, terrified, like a man carrying water in his hands, and he stood in the doorway of the imperfect room we'd made imperfect on purpose and laid her down with Mr. Pomfrey and pulled the half-read book within her reach and stood looking at her for a long time. I came and stood beside him in the dark. Neither of us said anything for a while. Down the hall, a child breathed, asleep, safe, for one more night not left. I don't know how to thank you for today, he said finally, very low, not looking at me. It's not a thing that goes in the contract. No, I agreed. It isn't. Esme. He turned to me, and the wall was just gone. He was too tired to hold it. The day had taken it down. We were standing very close in the dark doorway, watching a sleeping child, 2 people who had spent 12 hours being a family and had forgotten to put the quotation marks back. When the year ends, he said, and stopped, and I watched him make himself say the hard, true thing, the thing I'd been refusing to look at since the bridge. When the year ends, she's going to have had 2 people who didn't leave. And then one of them is going to leave. Because that's the contract. That's the thing I signed. That's the thing I made you sign, and I didn't. When I drew it up, she was a custody problem, and you were a solution. And now she's asleep down the hall calling you Esme, and I've made the most catastrophic miscalculation of my entire life. My heart was going very hard. Adrian. I don't know what to do, he said, and it was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. This man who acquired things and never wanted them, standing in the dark admitting he had wanted something he was contractually forbidden to keep. For the first time since I was younger than you, I genuinely don't know what the right move is. And I'm not allowed to find out. The clause is the clause. I wrote it for a reason. People who break it lose more than a gallery. He stepped back, deliberately, putting the air back between us, and his voice when it came again had the careful control I was beginning to hate. Good night, Esme. Thank you. For her. And he went down the west corridor that wasn't mine to follow him into, and I stood alone outside a sleeping child's door in a glass house I'd been hired to haunt for a year, and I understood 3 things with perfect clarity. That I was going to fall in love with both of them, completely, the cold man and the broken child, if I hadn't already. That the contract that had saved my mother's gallery was going to cost me something my mother's gallery couldn't pay back. And that in 11 months I was going to walk out of this house by the terms of a document I'd signed in good faith, and it was going to break 3 people instead of none, and there was a clause in clean, dull legal English that said it had to. To be continued. That was episode 4 of Paper Vows. If Esme and Adrian have your heart, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.